Automotive giant Stellantis is set to expand its South African and African presence with the construction of a R3 billion auto assembly plant in the Eastern Cape Sokuga Special Economic Zone in May. Currently, their local brands have been lagging behind in sales in SA, accounting for barely 1% of the market. Now, will this local manufacturing and new marketing strategy in Africa propel Stellantis to greater success? Joining us to delve deeper in a greater detail is the Financial Mail's David Furlonger. Thank you so much for your time, David.
Pleasure.
This is a greenfield project, meaning that everything is from scratch, something
Correct.
that hasn't been done since the 1970s. Has it been appetite from the manufacturers that's lacking, or maybe some other challenges?
It's an interesting question. Mike Whitfield, who's the head of Stellantis, says this will be the first greenfield project in terms of an assembly plant since the 1970s. In order for that actually to be true, the Chinese manufacturer BAIC, Beijing Auto, must continue not to do anything with its plant, which is very close to the Stellantis plant. BAIC announced its plant in 2018. It should have opened it in 2022, but it's not saying what's happening. We understand some work is going on, but certainly if one looks at Stellantis's record of meeting deadlines internationally, there's a very good chance it could beat BAIC to the punch.
I want to speak about Stellantis though, and this plan to expand to South Africa, and maybe even just the market share they enjoy here right now, how popular these vehicles are. Of course, some of the vehicles manufactured there would be for export, some would be for the domestic market. But where do they stand in South Africa?
Well, it's very difficult because Opel used to be a huge brand here when it was manufactured by General Motors. Yeah. Peugeot was big here. It's been manufactured here in the past under license at other plants. Fiat revolutionized the South African market when its little Uno entry-level vehicle was built here by Nissan. So a number of its brands are well known, and of course Jeep and Alfa Romeo, not big numbers, but everyone respects them. They're brands people would like to have. The problem is that those brands have just been sort of dispersed all over the place. They disappeared for a while. Citroën left for a while. Peugeot left for a while. Citroën came back. Citroën left. Citroën has now come back again. Others have sort of disappeared, partly during the disinvestment era, and also partly because when they came back, the people who were representing them at the time had no idea what to do with these brands. Peugeot is a perfect example. A couple of independents have marketed them here, and they made a mess of the whole thing. So now Stellantis came back 3 years ago. They had unrealistic expectations to begin with, but now they seem to be working out what they should be doing and to have a concerted marketing plan.
Yeah, there really seems to be a lack of awareness there. And firstly, let's look at cost versus return. This is a very big ambition that they're gunning for. Does the R3 billion investment suit the ambition? And also, what is informing their confidence that they could get a return that's more than this cost?
Okay, the good news for them is that not all $3 billion is coming from them.
Okay.
The Industrial Development Corporation is also paying some of the money. We're not quite sure yet what that sum will be. According to Mike Whitfield last week, that is still under discussion. But remember that this plant is built primarily for export to Africa and the Middle East. 65% of production is scheduled to go there, which means 35% here. If you look at Peugeot in Africa and the Middle East, it's pretty good there. It's still going to be a push to sell all those vehicles. 50,000 they're expecting to, well, they will have capacity for 50,000 from 2026. According to Whitfield last week, further development of capacity would grow according to demand, but that was kind of undercut by a statement from Stellantis in France to say that capacity would increase to 100,000 in 2030. So they're setting themselves big targets, but they didn't become the third biggest company in the world by missing targets. I have misgivings, I have to confess. If you're going to be selling 35% of those vehicles in South Africa, you've got to have a pretty good bucky. It's the Stellantis Landtrek. You're coming into a market of Toyota Hilux, a Ford Ranger, where most of the major manufacturers are well entrenched. The Chinese are coming in bigger numbers. I think that Stellantis has a hell of a big job to do to persuade the South African buyer of the virtues of the Landtrek. It's very ambitious. What they're planning is very ambitious. But again, this is not a company that's used to failure.
I must also ask you, though, about just doing business in South Africa and having a plant in South Africa. This is something that we've seen various manufacturers really battle with, and of course, really surviving it, being able to, keep on track. And I'm wondering if that's also something that has been well considered here, David. As a South African, I'm patriotic enough to want the plant to be here. Is this the best place for the plant to be?
There are really two places you can go, here and Morocco. But Morocco is primarily for export to Europe. It's an extension of the European motor industry. Stellantis has a plant there that by the end of this year will have capacity for 400,000 vehicles, which is half the total capacity of the current South African vehicle market, or the motor industry. But if you're going to come here, over half of the sales of new vehicles in the whole of Africa are in South Africa. Well over half are here. We've got the infrastructure, we have the capacity to move into those other markets, which perhaps they don't have in Morocco. Stellantis is also investing in Egypt and in Algeria at the moment, but we've got the capacity, we have the experience, we have all the components manufacturers here, and it's on a port. It's got Coega deep sea port, and it has the Port Elizabeth or the Quebec Ro-Ro port just up the road. So everything is in place if they can make it work in terms of selling the vehicles.
Yeah, the patriotism is even more on my side because Port Elizabeth is my home city. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights today,
welcome.
David. And that was editor-at-large for Financial Mail, David Furlonger.